Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be creating the Flask state, and this is to install the Flask application, not exactly deploy the app. And that is, I'm separating the two because we want we can have multiple Flask applications, but we want them to be able to use the same state rather than rewriting the install Flask app over and over and over again. So it's to basically cut down on repetition. So with that said, what we're going to do is we're going to create a Flask state, and then we're going to say that it's going to go ahead and install Flask via pip, and it's also going to create the home for all of our Flask apps in opt/Flask app, which we're only going to have one app in there right now. This is also going to be including the supervisor state. So make sure it's going to go ahead and make sure that supervisor is always installed before Flask gets installed. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and continue. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and make sure that I put this in a condition because I don't want these packages to be reinstalling every time this supervisor state gets run. So what we could do is we could put unless statements here, and technically that would work. Supervisor D or -H. This would technically work, but I would need it for every single state. So that's not exactly what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to make sure that this state only runs if the supervisor application is not installed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a condition. If saltcmd.run, or sorry, not run, I'm sorry, has exec is a better one. Has exec supervisor, or supervisor D, then go ahead and run. But actually, that logic is wrong. We want it to run only if supervisor D is not available. So if not saltcmd has exec supervisor D, then go ahead and run this particular state. And we can add that. Okay, so now that I've got this supervisor state in the top.sls, what I want to do is I want to test this out on a fresh kitchen VM. Rather than trying it on the existing web, I want to make sure that it does install on a fresh, non-supervisor installed Vagrant VM file, and then install it afterwards and see if it actually installs it a second time or skips it. So I can go ahead and destroy everything, and once I destroy it, it'll just recreate the Web01, but instead of doing that, I'm going to go ahead and create another one. I want to keep my Web01, and I'll just create Web02 to make sure that it is indeed able to install supervisor and skip supervisor on a next convergence. So let's go ahead and do kitchen converge Web02 CentOS 69. So this is going to take a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and pause here, and once this is finished, it should install Apache, the fake users, as well as supervisor, and then I'll go ahead and run convergence without destroying it again, and see if it skips supervisor, which it should. All right, so that way we get to make sure that this particular condition, this has exec, is indeed successful. So I'll go ahead and come back when this is finished. Okay, so it has finished. It's installed the necessary dependencies as well as supervisor and setup tools to finish off with. So this is the first time that this ran on this Web02. I'm going to go ahead and rerun convergence once again, and this one should be fairly quick. And we shouldn't see any of the supervisor states at all. It should completely just skip it. It shouldn't run at all. We wouldn't even see a message. So that's exactly right. So it just finished at Apache, because there wasn't a condition for Apache, but the service.running is smart enough to test out whether Apache is running, and it just returns us a message, where since we added a condition, it's not returning us a message, but since our condition is accurate. So if not supervisor D is available, or if supervisor D is not available, then go ahead and run it. If it isn't available, then don't run it, but not running it will not return any message, and that's exactly what happened. So we can go ahead and say that that particular condition has succeeded. We can continue from here. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create the Flask state. So let's go ahead and create this state. Now this state is just going to be to install Flask. It's not going to be to deploy the application, the Flask application. That's going to be a different state. I like to keep things different because I don't want to keep redeploying the same application with Flask if I have another Flask app all of a sudden. So I'm going to keep it separate, where the Flask state is, the Flask application is in its own state, and any subsequent application that uses Flask will call that state, which will also call supervisor because it's going to be included. So let's go ahead and create the file. So I'm going to go ahead and include, let me go ahead and get my salt. Yep, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and include the supervisor state. And I'm not going to run a condition here because I'm only installing Flask with pip. And pip.installed is smart enough to check if Flask is installed, and if it's not, then it's going to go ahead and just return a message. Or sorry, if it is installed, it's going to go ahead and return a message saying that Flask is already installed. Where we had to put that condition in supervisor D because we were reinstalling a lot of the modules, and I don't want to keep reinstalling them. So let me show you what I mean. So here, if we install it once and then we try to install it a second time, it'll just say Flask is already installed. But here in supervisor, we're force reinstalling a lot of the packages, and I don't want to keep force reinstalling it over and over and over again when I don't have to. So I'm only going to call this if supervisor exists, and if it doesn't exist, then it's going to go ahead and install it. If it does exist, then it'll just continue without carrying on this particular state. So that will install supervisor. So I can go ahead and get rid of supervisor from this top.sls here and put in Flask. So now if I do a kitchen converge, I can do it on Web02 just for the heck of it. So why not run it on Web02? So this isn't going to rerun it since supervisor is already installed. It's just going to go ahead and skip that whole state, and it's just going to run Flask from there on. It shouldn't take too long. Yep, there we go. See, it skipped the whole supervisor state, but it installed Flask. And it needs to install, Flask needs pip for the pip.install module, which is actually included in the supervisor state. And that's how that check goes. So I don't have to worry too much about that. All right, so on the next video, what we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and create our Flask application. I'm going to name it some weird hello from Salt or some weird name, and then go ahead and deploy that. And that should include the Flask state. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of, the Flask from top.sls and put in whatever the Flask application is here. And then that will include Flask, which will include supervisor, and so on, and any further dependencies. All right, so I hope to see you guys then. Bye.